I have to give my location scout credit for finding a location like this. Hey, wait a minute, that's me because I do everything here on this show. We're here in front of what looks like a really beaten up dealership for one very good reason. This is the end of two eras for General Motors. Behind me, whatever's left of it, is one of Canada's original largest dealers that GM had. It was Parkway Pontiac GMC Buick. It closed down in 2010 when the Great Recession hit and GM went bankrupt. So that was the end of that era. Pontiac was killed off and vehicles like Buick were sold now in regular Chevrolet dealerships. But it's also an end of an era because of this vehicle, which is why our spotlight is on this 2018 Buick Regal GS. This actually is completely built, assembled, and developed in Europe as an Opel, a company that GM actually sold off last year. So while this car bears a Buick badge, it is in reality a German vehicle that isn't actually owned by GM anymore. So we're going to be showing you everything about this car, taking it on a drive, taking it on the drag strip, and going over everything you need to know if you're in the market for a European Buick. So during my introduction, I talked about how this was the end of another era for General Motors. Last year, 2017, they sold off the Opel brand to PSA, Peugeot Citroën, in Europe. Now, Opel has been around for quite some time. It's a German brand. But this isn't the first car that Buick has sold as a German vehicle. This is actually one of many. Over the course of the 70s, 60s, actually, the Opel brand was sold here in North America. And then in the 70s, 80s, they were rebadged as Buicks, as captive imports. And then into the 2000s, we actually had a lot of Opels and brought over here as Saturns, Buicks, Chevrolets, the whole deal. So this isn't the first car of its kind, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be the last. The only other non-American brand that GM still has is Holden in Australia. And the last time they brought a car over from there, it really didn't do too well. That was the Chevrolet SS. So I do think that this is the end of GM's ability to badge engineer or captively import vehicles from another market. That's the end of it, unless they bring their Buicks from China. That could be a possibility. But the point is, this car is relatively unique. It's sort of like the Kia Stinger. We actually are going to be doing a showdown on this, so you can click the video to see the Stinger showdown. It's actually going to be published on the Thursday that this is being published. So if you're watching this new, then you'll have to wait a few days. But if you are watching this after the fact, then you should be able to see our Kia Stinger showdown with the Buick Regal GS. Now the front end is certainly European. You've got LED headlights with LED turn signals. There are no fog lights with this. The Buick Regal Avenir will have fog lights, but because this is a sportier car, they've taken them off. Aside from that, the car is pretty straightforward. It looks pretty good. I do like the look of it. Up front, you have Brembo brakes with the 19-inch rims, and that's really about it. You do have access to all four doors with keyless entry, but there are no power folding mirrors, and there's no automatic high beams or automatic wipers. The car is relatively basic, very similar in fact to a lot of the features that we saw last week with the Buick LaCrosse Avenir. So they do have less features on this, probably again to force you to go up to something more maybe like the ATS-V. I know that this is a mid-size sedan, so really it would compete with a CTS-V, but I just think that probably because this is lower priced, maybe the ATS-V would be sort of the other vehicle you'd be looking at, but obviously that's going to have way more power than this. Now let's take a look around the back because it is unique as well. Now to be fair, some of that uniqueness might be lost if you did watch our Kia Stinger video already, whether it's the showdown or our individual spotlight on it, or you are aware of what this car has to offer. It's not your regular trunk. It does have a lift back design, which is quite nice. The trunk space is very good. You have a lot of space to be able to put things in there. You do have, there's no spare tire, but you do have the ability to pump up essentially the run flats. There's a little compartment underneath where your Bose speaker is, and a little bit of tools there as well. I find that the trunk space is good, very comparable to the Kia Stinger. And personally, I do like the back end of the car. It is relatively basic. You do have sort of, I'd say, a European design to the rear end of it. Now out back, you do have LED taillights, not LED reverse lights though, but at least LED plate lights, which is kind of a nice thing. You do have parking sensors all the way around. It helps rumbles your seat if you're getting too close to something. And really the only feature that's kind of missing, there are no Brembo brakes on the back. It's only on the front of this car, so it's like 8/10 of a performance car, especially 8/10 of something like the Kia Stinger. I know we keep referring to it, but trust me, if you really are interested in a car like this, unless you're really a huge GM fan and you will not consider anything else, first of all, I have to ask you, this isn't really a Buick, but I guess it still is technically a GM because Opel was owned when it was developed by GM. But I do think that the Kia Stinger is what you're going to be looking at along with this, especially if you want a fastback sedan such as this and your budget is $49,000 Canadian. Now let's jump inside and see what the Buick Regal has to offer on the inside. Now the interior of this car is pretty straightforward. It's actually very different from what we've seen on the other Buick models we've featured so far. I mean, it does have the same navigation screen, same climate controls, but everything else is just a little different, plus the same steering wheel too. It's all the same, but the center console is actually where things get a little different. Instead of using that weird BMW style shifter where you have to push the button to unlock it, and then it's kind of weird. It's using a regular shift knob here, and I do like it. There's a manual shift mode with it. You just throw it over. It's sort of the reverse of what most people would expect at this point. Down, pulling towards you to the back of the car is to shift down, and going forward is to shift up. Sometimes they are reversed depending on what kind of car you're driving. Now the one thing I was kind of surprised about when it came to this car is this is the sport model. The GS is supposed to be the sportiest version of the Buick Regal, but there are no paddle shifters on the steering wheel. There were on the Buick LaCrosse Avenir, which is not a sport vehicle, but for some reason they've omitted them from this car. But in terms of features, everything is actually pretty standard from what we saw on both the LaCrosse and Enclave. You do have a heated steering wheel, heated and ventilated front seats, dual zone automatic climate control, navigation, a great color head-up display, blind spot monitoring, forward collision warning, active cruise control, lane keep assist, all the safety features that you would expect, especially at this price point. You do have two sport modes as well. There is a sport mode, which will stiffen up the steering a little bit, stiffen up the suspension, add a little bit more time to the shifts so you can get more revs out of each shift. But there's also a GS mode, which kind of takes that same profile and just extends it a little bit more. And I do find that you feel it quite a bit. We'll talk about that when we're on the road. Aside from that, though, the interior is spacious enough for somebody like me. The AGR sport seats are actually very comfortable. They're not quite as sport feeling that you might expect. They're not stiff and tight. You can adjust them quite a bit, but I do find that they are very comfortable up here. Rear seat space is also good too if you have a family, if you're going to be putting people in the back seat. Headroom is pretty decent, and legroom is also good as well. It's a little bit shorter. Again, this is using the same E2XX platform that the LaCrosse was. It is still GM's Epsilon platform, but it's a short wheelbase version of it, whereas the LaCrosse was using a long wheelbase, so you still get good mid-size sedan space back there, but just not quite as much as the LaCrosse had. But again, this is a sportier car, despite it somehow being heavier, but it does have good room back there. My one complaint about the interior here is really the feel of the materials. You do have carbon fiber just below the navigation screen here, around your vents, and then around your door handles and door locks, even for the back seats. The thing is, though, it doesn't feel overly premium, much like the Kia Stinger. Again, we're talking about it. You do have a fake leather wrapped dashboard. It's not real, but they do put stitching on it to make it look like it is real, but it is hard plastic, and even the door cards have quite a bit of plastic. The panel gaps are great, though. Everything lines up exactly the way you would expect it to. There's no issues with the actual build quality. It's just I don't find that it's an overly premium vehicle. And again, we talked about this with the LaCrosse. If Buick wants this brand to succeed, if they want to be able to capture the interests of younger people, I think they are going to have to add more to it, make it a little bit more appealing at the $49,000 price point to be able to say to people, look, this isn't just a sport car, but it's also got those premium luxuries that you would expect, things like the leather in more than one place, because it really is a lot of plastic in this car. You almost feel like you're maybe driving something that doesn't have that Buick badge on it. But the most important thing for a car like this, when it is a performance vehicle, is to take it on the road. So we're going to get on the road and see how this car really does perform, and if it is as good as some of the other performance cars we've driven this year. I essentially stole this car from GM. I went to go pick up a completely different vehicle, but when I was talking to the communications manager out here, I kind of overheard that this car was now available. It was actually his vehicle that he was using for a couple weeks to break it in. It's got 1,300 kilometers now, but I picked it up around 900. And I used a little bit of my finesse and magic to be able to get this car instead of what we had booked before. And I have to say that it works out well because we just came off having the Buick LaCrosse Avenir. So we had their full-size-ish flagship model in Buick's sedan lineup. But I wanted to see what the GS had to offer. It's sportier, and actually, believe it or not, it's actually heavier. I think it's about 300-400 pounds heavier, according to the paperwork that I was given on both the Regal GS and the LaCrosse Avenir. It doesn't make any sense to me. This car is slightly smaller, but for some reason it's heavier. It's 4,100 pounds, something like that. Now, I have to give GM credit for not calling this the Grand National. Thank God, because it really doesn't feel anything like a Grand National. But that GS badge is something from GM's history with Buick. I think it certainly deserves that Grand Sport kind of thing. It is sportier. It does look quite nice, very European, and obviously it would be because it is a German car. Now, the reason why this car is interesting is because it is a little bit more sport oriented. It's interesting though, there is no manual transmission, there is no dual clutch transmission. It is a regular 9-speed automatic, and furthermore, even though the LaCrosse had paddle shifters, this doesn't. It's kind of strange. You do have manual shift mode with your regular shift column here, and I guess it works. I mean, I've used it a little bit, and it certainly has a bit of a fun aspect to it, but I mean, really, you know, manual is going to be the most fun, and then paddle shifters if you're really going for performance and you want to have that automatic. But what I like about this is there's actually 3 different drive modes. If the car is just running normally, you start it up, it's in normal mode, and it feels like pretty much any other actually German sedan that you'd be driving. It has a relatively stiff but compliant steering to it. You can put the car into sport mode. It'll obviously allow the shifts to take a little bit longer, to have a little bit more run with the gears, but also it'll stiffen up the suspension and the steering just a little bit. You can actually feel it. If you do drive a car like this, obviously you would, if you're going to be going and buying it, go around a corner, have the buttons ready to go, and go from normal mode, especially if you're going into the GS sport mode, but you'll feel it. When you go around the corner and you push GS and the wheel is turning, you will feel a noticeable difference in how heavy this steering wheel feels. They reduce some of the power steering to make it feel a little bit more lifelike, and I have to say I really like it. I've been driving this car exclusively in GS mode because it just feels a little bit nicer. I really do like that. Now, it isn't anything spectacularly fast. I mean, we're looking at about 310 horsepower on this car, so you're not going to be setting any land speed records with it, but the fact that it is all-wheel drive might help if you're going at something like a drag race, but also if you are buying it for a year-round commuter like this. If you're here in Quebec, you're going to be using that all-wheel drive system during the winter, and even now, I mean, it doesn't really help with the fuel economy. We're at 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers, which is certainly high, but it's not overly bad for a mid-size premium sedan such as this. It's pretty average for what you'd be getting, but I have to say that I really do enjoy driving this car. It actually handles really well, and we're not going from a dig yet, but I'm not going full throttle, but it does pick up. I have to say that you aren't going to be worried about power with this car. Definitely picks up, and the handling is quite good. Maybe it's not go-kart like good, but I do find that it is really close to the Kia Stinger. Really close. So one thing that we don't normally do here on Test Drive is actually drive these cars in a performance setting, and it's partially due to the fact that, I mean, for the most part this year, everything has been winter. Can't really be doing a whole lot of performance driving in the winter, but I have found a racetrack here in St. Pie, Quebec, and they do weekly drag nights. We have been here a couple times, not with any of the press cars that we've had, but we have come here to watch, and we've decided to bring the Buick Regal GS to see kind of how it does. Now, I'm not actually going with anybody else here, but I am going to be kind of seeing what this car could do. I mean, it's not really a super performance car, and we've seen some other cars go on, something like the Kia Stinger, which is very comparable, at least on paper, to what this car has to offer. But this is still a decently performance-oriented car. You're certainly not going to be setting a 10-second quarter mile with this, but 13? I think you can at least get 13 and a bit. What do you think? I don't know if I can get much better. I also don't have a way to time it. I don't have anybody else out in the stands watching me go, so unfortunately I'm just gonna go, and I'll see, maybe you guys can time it in the comments when we actually get to the end. The light will flash to tell me that I've hit the quarter mile, or at least it'll tell me that I win. I actually don't know how it works here. All right, children, it's go time. Now, I don't know if there really is a launch control, but we're gonna find out by pretty much hammering the acceleration and the brake. It's holding it. There we go. 1.2 off the line. Okay, we've hit 100 right now. Man, it's quick. It's not blistering speed though, but it's pretty quick. There we go, we won. Woohoo, I won! I wasn't racing anybody, so of course I won. But, you know, up to 150 kilometers there, pretty much when we went over the line, at least when the light told me that I won. I think it happens just after you actually hit the quarter mile. But, you know, 150 kilometers an hour is actually not too bad when you're doing a car like this. You know, it's not a super duper performance car. This isn't something like the Cadillac CTS-V, but you know, I think it is competent enough. I think really though, you're not necessarily going to be taking this on the track, right? I know that's what I'm doing with it right now, which is silly. You're not necessarily going to be taking this on the track, but for daily driving life, it's certainly good. I'm impressed. I still like it after taking it on the track. It still works too. It's the most important part. We did about 15 seconds in the quarter mile, slower than my mid-13s that I was hoping for, and to be fair, this car is supposed to do it in 14.3 seconds from what we've gathered. I don't have the physique of a race car driver, nor is using our video timecode an accurate way to measure this, but at least it's something to go on. So it's not the most performance-oriented midsize sedan on the market, but what does it do well? We love the look of the Buick Regal GS, with its European design and lines. Interior comfort was also great, with heated, ventilated, and massaging front seats. The trunk offers plenty of room, with a mix of a wagon and sedan all rolled into one. Fuel economy was also better, with its less powerful 310 horsepower engine averaging 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers after almost 1,000 kilometers during our week. And finally, the all-wheel drive system is a plus, which helps to make this vehicle fit right in with the premium midsize sedan segment. Now, the Buick Regal GS isn't perfect, and we were missing a few features that we would have liked to have seen at this $49,000 price point. The interior could use more leather trim to help boost its premium feel and image. The headlights were good, especially with the unique illumination for the high beams. However, the LED system doesn't incorporate any active cornering or additional turning lights like the Buick LaCrosse did. The lack of proper rear Brembo brakes makes this feel like half a performance car, and only 2 engine options. There's a missed opportunity for Buick to make a comeback with a performance division. Now, don't get me wrong, Buick should never, ever name another car the Grand National ever again. Nothing could ever come close to that second generation's infamy with that trim. But I'm sure GM enthusiasts would love to see the return of a proper performance-oriented Buick, and the Regal could have been it. Either way, I enjoyed my week with this 2018 Buick Regal GS, especially the few times that I caught younger enthusiasts commenting, "Is that a Buick?" It gave me the opportunity to talk to them a little about this car's German origins and their genuine interest in a car that they'd have scoffed off as a grandpa car. While the Regal GS won't be for everybody, it does offer something unique in a segment that's already a little vague with competition. Thanks for watching this episode of Test Drive Spotlight on the 2018 Opel Insignia Grand Sport. What do you think of this German in disguise? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out our episode of Test Drive Showdown on the Kia Stinger GT versus this Buick Regal GS, available as of 7 a.m. Eastern on the 16th of August, 2018. We invite you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already, as we publish weekly episodes of Test Drive right here on Perpetual Radio Networks. Until next time, take care.